And welcome back to the Mad Sopranos Men Show. I'm your host, Michael Dennis, and my co host, Chris Brodhead. We are the most autistic Sopranos show on the internet. We are also the most autistic Mad Men show on the internet because we analyze both shows at once, episode at a time. This week, we are now up to episode 7 in season 1. And it's been about a month or so since we've done an episode because Chris has moved worldwide. Chris, where are you today?
Mr. Worldwide. Today I am in Barcelona, Spain.
And how long have you been there?
We got here January 31st, so it's today the 9th, so I guess
Yeah.
it's about 10 days.
All right. How's it been, man? I want to hear all about it.
Yeah. It's been pretty cool. You know, ever since I came to Europe as a boy, I was like, someday I will live here. And that day was 10 days ago.
All right.
Me and my wife moved here. We brought our dog. Sandy is now learning Spanish as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Um,
yeah.
that was what my wife was most interested in. She was like, "What's going on with the dog? Is the dog going with him? What's gonna happen to Sandy?" And she kept asking me over and over again. And I was like, "I don't know. I forgot to ask." And just every single week, she'd be like, "What's going on with the dog? Is the dog going overseas?" Like, I don't know. I don't know.
I
I'll
don't
ask about it
know.
later. And then I saw a picture of you guys, and I think it was your wife posted a picture of you guys in New York on your way out of town. I was like, well, I think that's our answer. The dog's at least going to New York.
Yeah, we took her to New York and threw her off a bridge.
Yeah, you put the dog on an ocean liner so it could travel and then meet you there.
We we took the dog to a farm upstate.
Yeah, yeah. That same farm has like 10,000 dogs living on it now.
Yeah, and some bunnies, and I think
Yeah,
my iguana.
and not my the only pet I had growing up was a guinea pig named Snowball, and he
Mm.
didn't go upstate. He just froze to death in the basement one day, and I just
So
went down.
horrible.
Well, look, I went down there to like check on him, and usually he comes to the side of the cage and does his little like
Yeah.
when you come down to feed him, and he didn't come up to greet me that day. And I went over there and I went to go shake him and wake him up, and he didn't respond. And man, that thing was as hard as this countertop. It was
Dude,
it was wild.
wait, did someone leave, like, a window open in the basement? Why was it so cold down there?
I don't even think it was the cold that killed him. I just think
Oh,
it ran its course, and rigor mortis had set in over the previous, like, 24 hours and just took him out of the game.
that's a core memory there, man.
Yeah,
I can see your personality coming from there.
you can see it coming through. Sandy made the trip. Was she in a crate during the whole flight? Like, walk me through a little bit of that.
Yeah, so, um, you can only fly to a couple countries in Europe with a dog. Like, we
Mhm.
were originally gonna take a cheaper flight to, London, but you would have to put the dog in the crate, like, underneath,
Yeah,
and, God only knows what happens down there to your dog, so I was like, "No, I'm not gonna do that to my dog." It's like,
yeah.
"Where can I fly?" And they're like, "Oh, well, Spain doesn't give a fuck." And I was like, "Alright, cool." So, we had to go to the vet, and get her USDA certified, which,
Okay. Like she's a good like meat? Like the meat I
yeah,
get at the,
yep.
okay.
She's officially USDA certified.
You're traveling with livestock?
Yeah. I am, I'm officially licensed to travel with livestock, and, you have to do that within 10 days. So you can't do it further out than 10 days. It has to be
Oh,
within 10 days.
yeah, and
So that
speaking for personal experience, you don't work too well on deadlines like that.
well, I did everything I needed to do, but
Yeah.
the USDA was like, "Yeah, we'll get to it." And then it was, like, the day before, and I was like, "Hey, do I need to, like, change my flight?" And they're like, "Oh, fuck, did we not do that?" And they literally stayed on the phone with me until, like, 7 p.m., uh, Mountain Time, and
Yeah.
then FedEx was closed. They wouldn't, uh update my um shipping label. So the doctor was just like, "All right, I know someone at FedEx," and she literally just updated FedEx through her person to like make sure that we could fly the next day.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Thank you for doing that, but you also could have just sent me this 9 days ago.
Yeah,
We could
this
have
didn't have to
avoided
this
all of
didn't have
this."
to happen.
Yeah, so that was a nightmare.
So she sat with you in the cabin, like, at your feet?
Yeah, 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 they just let you have her, like, below the seat in front of you, so,
Okay.
sometimes I had her in my lap. The flight was only, like, 7 hours. I mean,
That's not too bad.
it's still probably the longest flight she's ever been on, but,
Yeah.
it actually the flight fucked me up more than it fucked her up, like, sitting for that long, I, like, pulled a muscle in my my ass. So, like, for the last 10 days, I've been like an old man, and I'm just like, "God damn it." Like, every time I stand, like, my leg won't go all the way,
Okay.
and it's like, it's not my back and it's not my leg, it's like, it's somewhere halfway between, like, my hamstring and my glute, and
Okay.
it just feels like I'm getting stabbed, and I'm like, "Alright, the fuck's going on?" I'm old, almost 40.
So aside from physical ailments, how is it out there? How are you doing?
It's cool. This is a super walkable city. I think we walk at least like 4 or 5 miles a day.
Yeah.
Um, drinks at restaurants here are like basically free. Coming from Los Angeles, where a beer is like $11 and a glass of
Yeah.
wine is like 25.
Yeah, you've taken these steps, like, there was how much drinks cost for us in college, and then Chicago, and then LA, and now you just went all the way right back down.
I had to do just restarted the cycle. The
Yeah.
drinks here are literally cheaper than they were in college. I think a beer was like $3 in college,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, they're like
Something
they're
like
like
that. Yeah.
$2. And it's the most delicious beer you've ever tasted in your fucking life.
Yeah. It's not filled with preservatives.
It's not all natural light.
How are you handling, like, the time difference? What time is that there right now? I'm recording this at 1:00, 1:15 Eastern Standard Time.
Yeah, it's 7:15
Okay.
Central Europe time, 6 hours
How
ahead of you.
how is that affecting, like, your business and your clients?
Dude, it's awesome.
Yeah?
Like, normally, I'm on Pacific time, so when I wake up, there's, like, 19 fires that
Yeah.
I have to put out immediately, so, like, that's a great way to start your day with, like, 19 anxiety attacks. But now I wake up and no one's awake for 6 hours, 7 hours, 9
Mhm.
hours sometimes.
Yeah.
As I was like, "What? Well, like, should we go to the gym? Should we go out to lunch for 4 hours?" Like,
Yeah. You have an entire day before, like, the day starts.
yeah, yeah. And then, so I usually work like 12 to 8 or so, and
Mhm.
then no one in Spain eats dinner until 8 or 9 or 10.
Yeah.
So it's like restaurants won't even be open until 8. Like we got dinner at like 7 and they had to turn the lights on for us. They're like, "Oh shit, what the fuck are you doing here?"
We were taking a siesta.
Yeah.
Is
Oh,
that is that what it's is that what it's called?
everything closes from like 3 to 7.
Yeah, interesting. I've
Yeah.
I've heard that, but, I've never really experienced it.
Everybody's napping. People work here from maybe like 10 to noon, and then everyone goes to lunch from like 12 to 3, and then they work from like 3 to 8, I guess.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm digging it.
yeah, how's the wife handling it? She enjoying it too?
Yeah, she's happy. We found a really nice apartment that was at least double what I had said our maximum would be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I remember my dad telling me one time, when it comes to planning a trip or planning moving or anything big, whatever you have budgeted for, just go ahead and double it.
Mhm.
Just
Mhm.
write out your entire budget, and whenever you get to the end, just go back and double everything, and that's what it's gonna end up actually being.
Your dad was a smart man.
Yeah, that was one thing he got right.
Yeah, yeah. But, it's a nice place and it's furnished, and we get to move in there tomorrow. So, we're excited. And we found like a Soho House type place
Oh,
that's
perfect.
not a Soho House.
Yeah,
It's like a co-working space and a gym and a bunch of restaurants and a rooftop pool. So Erica was very excited about that.
that's awesome.
So that
I've had
we're gonna be
trouble
buying
finding
our friends.
I've had trouble finding a co-working space here in Cincinnati. There really isn't like a Soho House or anything like it.
Mm.
And I've kinda hopped
That's
around.
surprising.
Sometimes I'll go down to, like, a nice hotel and, like, work and eat in the bar area or the restaurant because
Okay.
you always have people coming in and out and interesting people and kinda, to chat with.
You you and all the high-priced, escorts?
Yeah, exactly. But the other place I have found an excellent place to go work. It provides me seclusion, provides me comfort, and that
Mm.
is my childhood room at my mom's house.
Oh,
I've recently moved back in
memories.
I've recently moved back into the 3rd floor over my mom's house. So I'll drop the girls off or do whatever, and then I'll go over there, and every morning my mom has breakfast for me and we chit
Mm.
chat, and then I go up and I've rearranged now like the entire end of the room so I can put like a big monitor and all this stuff. And my mom was saying the other day because I used to have a futon up there, but she took the mattress off so the dog could sleep on it and that stuff. And she's like, I'm gonna go up there the next few days. I'm gonna clean up some stuff, and I'm gonna take apart that futon since there's no mattress on it. And I go, you're not doing anything. Don't ever go up there. It's mine. It has never stopped being mine. And I'm in the process of going and buying a new futon mattress to put on it so that I can nap and play games and just resume my life as a 17-year-old.
So I can start fresh with something to soil with
Yeah.
my bodily fluid.
Yeah, oh yeah. Wait, you took my futon mattress and now the dog's sleeping on it? Well, it's been 20 years. I'm certain everything's dried up by now.
It's past the statute of limitations. We're alright.
Yeah, it's not like it's gonna, seep into the dog's hair or anything. So it's
I
it's
can't the
okay.
dog is crusty now. I'm not sure, it must be
Yeah.
allergies.
That reminds me of one time going to a party, and a buddy of mine, Garrett, we were walking around. It was a boring party and it really sucked. And at one point, this dog comes by. There's a dog running around, and I go to pet it, and he goes, "Don't pet that dog. Do not pet that dog." And I go, "Why not?" And he goes, "Cause I peed on it." And he's like, "It followed me into the bathroom, and then so I just took a whiz on it." And at first I was like, "That's odd. I wonder what the payoff to this is gonna be." And then like 5 minutes later, we're in the kitchen and we hear everybody being like, "Oh, such a cute dog. Hey, why is the dog all wet?" And everybody's like, "Oh, it must have been some beer or something spilled on it."
Garrett was a evil genius.
That really was. I was like, what a great wild idea. I never would have thought of that.
The
Yeah.
dog doesn't care. He's like, "Alright, cool."
Do not pet that dog. Do not pet that dog. Let's
Yeah.
all right, enough about our moving and our past philanderings. Let's hop into this in episode 7.
Yeah,
This week is
yeah.
yeah. Sopranos, it's down neck. On Mad Men, it's red in the face. Just to back up a little bit, when we first started this series out, I in the back of my head, we've noticed so many things line up and so many different coincidence, not coincidences, but story structure and arcs lining up between the two shows.
Mhm.
I had this episode in mind of Sopranos where Tony has the flashback to when he was a kid and explains a lot
Mhm.
of him. I thought for sure this was going to line up exactly with the Hobo Code episode of Mad
Mm.
Men,
Mhm. Mhm.
where we flash back and he's a kid and we learn so much about him.
Yeah.
And I was one episode off.
Ah. I
Next week is next week is the Hobo Code.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if episode 7 and 8 of basically both these seasons were probably interchangeable.
Yeah. Yeah,
you know?
because a lot of it takes place in the past.
Yeah.
Aside from Mad Men, the only thing I'm trying to think of anything that takes place in the Hobo Code that couldn't have taken place in this episode. Like, you don't see his hippie girlfriend, which they break up at the end of the Hobo Code. He gives her that check
Mhm.
and he leaves. That's the end of her. Like those two, that and Mad Men, I think for sure these two episodes could have been swapped.
Mhm. Yeah. To me, this smells of Matt Weiner covering his tracks.
Is that it?
Yeah. He's
I'll
like,
make it
"Can't make
one up.
it
I'll make it.
too obvious."
I can't make it too obvious. Yeah. The other thing about this episode of Mad Men that I love is Don and Roger's evening or afternoon out on the town,
Oh,
their
yeah.
oyster and martini afternoon,
This
which became
might be my favorite Mad Men episode.
yeah, which you and I reenacted many a times. But I got such a kick sitting here watching that, and I it's I haven't been out to a day like that in a long time. I'm just sitting here watching it like, God damn it. Just want to go do this so bad.
Yeah, I was, telling Erica while we were watching it that, I was like, "Oh, yeah, when me and Mike would sign a big client, which was, like, $1,000 in 2010 or wait, what was this?
2013, 14. Yeah.
2012, 13. I was like, "Oh, yeah, we'd go to this place called Shaw's Crab Shack, and we'd get oysters and martinis, and it was great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good times."
Let's talk about something you and I never noticed in this episode, even though we watched it 50 times, is
Yeah.
I never noticed that Don pays off the elevator guy
Mhm.
to set it all up. I've
Yeah.
never that completely went over my head every single time.
Dude, I've seen this episode at least 5 times, if not, like, 15 times,
Yeah.
because we would watch it a
When you
lot.
said when you messaged me and you were like, "I've seen this 5 times and I've never noticed that." I'm like, "I feel like we've both watched this 20 times together, like, we've never picked up on it."
I'm obviously watching it a lot closer, I'm taking detailed notes, and my note was like, "Oh, that's cool, Don knows the elevator attendant's name." Like,
Yeah,
that's just more information about his character, and then I think it was because I noticed that I was like, "Oh, that's the same elevator that he gave money to, and we never found out why." Like, I thought I was like, "Oh, he's getting some info on Pete or something?"
yeah, yeah,
And it's like, "No, dude, like, Don feels royally fucking crossed by Roger, and Roger is, above him in the corporate hierarchy, so he had to get very clever on how to get back at him."
yeah. They're very deceivious, very well thought out,
Yeah.
like,
And
way
and it's
to
like, he Don knows that, like, this Nixon campaign, like, he doesn't give a fuck about it, and they're not gonna make any money on it, so he's like, "Alright, I'll just, like, embarrass the shit out of Roger in front of these, like, dickheads."
yeah, yeah, in front of the Nixon administration.
Yeah.
I have a question for you about the very last, scene in this episode when they get back to the office and Roger barfs. And he sits down on the stair and a girl brings over a glass of water and Don's standing above him and he's like, "You gonna be okay? You gonna be okay?" Does Roger know that he's been set up at that point? Because he has a look of pure fucking hatred that he is giving Don at that second as he's pale and he just sits there like, does Roger do the math?
Maybe.
Does he know there?
I don't think so. I don't think Roger is as conniving or clever as Don is. Like, this
Yeah,
this is something that only Don could pull off, you know? Don I mean, Don probably wouldn't even have to bribe the attendant, he just, like, treats him with respect, and the attendant's like, "Yeah, sure, this motherfucker doesn't even make eye contact with me. I'm
yeah.
happy to do something to make his day worse."
And the scene when they come back from lunch and the elevator's broken and we have that kind of fade in on the attendant and he's like and he looks really worried and concerned having never registered to me before that Don pays him off. I just always assumed that was him being worried that this was going to cause problems, just the elevator being down, and that he was somehow gonna get blamed for it being the lowest
Mhm,
man on the possible totem pole. That
mhm,
that 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 was originally where his, nervousness in that scene came from.
mhm.
But now we know he was in on it, and, he had a little something on the line too.
Yeah, yeah. And it's kinda remarkable that, you know, this was before we realized this, it's like, this was still one of my favorite episodes, and it's
Mhm.
like, we're watching this as if, like, some amazing deus ex machina happens, and it's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, the universe is, like, getting back at Roger for, overstepping, being a habitual line stepper."
Yeah, 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 big time.
And you're like, "Oh, that's cool," and Don gets a little kick out of it, and you're like, "Oh, shit, no, never mind. Don instigated all of this."
Yeah. You mentioned a few minutes ago about Roger not being as conniving or scheming as, Don, and I think that's also a byproduct of just he's never had to be.
Mhm, exactly.
You
Yeah,
know, he's considering his station in life, the job that he's had, who his parents were, he's never had to scheme like that or look at the world like that.
yeah, yeah. He
And
never had
that's
to develop skills like that, which is why Don is infinitely more valuable than Roger. I mean, there's
yeah,
scenes later in the series where Roger's, like, on his last, desperate attempt to do something, and he's like, "Well, what about Don?"
yeah, yeah. And look at, all the all the plots that Don develops throughout this entire series. He's even the one that comes up with Lane firing them from, the English company.
Mhm.
He's the one that writes the letter. He's the one that is the driving force behind all these schemes and plots. And then you go look at Roger, who, his one account was Lucky Strike. And when that gives notice, he literally does nothing.
Yeah,
He doesn't even tell anyone for a month. And
yeah.
then his one course of action is to pretend that he's doing something
Mhm.
and going down to North Carolina to save the account. He just goes to a hotel and drinks himself stupid. Like there's no part of him that is uh a little deceivious, a little as the French say bartesque. There's no part of him that does that.
Well, I think this is there's a great saying, like, "Hard times create great men who create great times that creates soft men."
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is that quote just perfectly illustrated, and also, you know, kind of the upper class kinda looks down their nose at, um, you know, lower class folk, and it's like there are major benefits that are hugely important to maintaining the status of the upper class that only the lower class develop. I mean, like, Sterling Cooper would not be what it is if Don weren't raised in on a farm
Mhm.
in the middle of Iowa or wherever, and forced to, scrappy learn these lessons to get back at him, like, the firm wouldn't survive, and it wouldn't, be as
No.
successful.
No,
So
it never
it's
becomes that.
I mean, really, like, Mad Men from the outside, you're like, "Oh, it's just a bunch of rich white people." But you're like, "No, this is, like, class warfare, like, every frame."
Peggy as well falls into this.
Yeah. Mhm.
And her status kind of up against Joan. Well, you said a second ago about looking down on a lower class. That's evident in the very like first scene of the show when uh, Roger's at dinner with Don and Betty, and they're going around the table talking, and Roger makes a comment about the way you drop your G's
Oh, yeah. I'd never noticed
every
that before either.
the way you drop your G's every now and then. I figured you grew up someplace with a swimming hole.
Yeah.
And that lines up perfectly with what you just said.
Yeah, and you could see, Don has, like, a nearly perfect poker face,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
you could tell that, like, that got under his skin,
Yeah.
And I would
Someone
almost
saw through it.
argue,
Someone saw through the mask a little bit.
yeah, I would almost argue that that pissed him off more than Roger, making a pass at his wife.
Yeah. Which by the way, I'm not gonna cast stones at Roger for that. Considering what
Okay,
considering what endless philanderers they and drunks they all are, I don't blame Roger for just kinda going along with what he normally does. I'm not gonna hate on a fish for swimming.
yeah. Okay, I have some big thoughts on the the dinner scene and the apology scene. So, watching it by myself, obviously I'm like, what the fuck is Betty doing? She's like probably throwing herself at Roger. And
Mhm.
watching it with my wife afterward, I'm like, babe, do you think she was out of line or was overly flirty or interested in him? And she's like, no, I think he was or she was fairly neutral and just like trying to appease
Yeah,
her husband's boss. And I was like, "I think you're right," and I think that's why they did this, like, they wanted us to be skewed by Don's perspective. He's feeling like Roger is overstepping, and all she's doing is trying to keep the peace and keep her husband from getting fired.
yeah, yeah. I I never really saw Betty being out of line, which is why I always and it's so out of Betty's character to go make a run at Roger, like, right in front of Don like that, so
Mhm,
Don's reaction to it he's correctly sniffing something out, but it's not coming from his wife at all,
mhm.
and but I'm also looking at it through the lens of, like, you know, January Jones in that dress, like, oh my god, like, how could you how could you turn off a part of you to be like, should I at least pose a question to see if something's in play here?"
I know I shouldn't eat the
Yeah, yeah. Michael, that's not God. That's just January Jones in a '50s house dress. What's the difference? Um,
uh,
I'm with you. This is one of my favorite episodes. When
mhm.
we were getting married and going through that whole process, I can't tell you how many times I made a joke about the chip and dip and how
Mm,
many
mhm,
times we would
mhm,
get a gift that was the same thing. And no matter
mm.
what it was, I would just keep saying, "It's a chip and dip." We got 2 of them, which is practically like having 4 of something. I would just say that about anything related to our wedding gifts, just over and over again. Jenny got so annoyed by
It's a
it.
chip and dip.
It's a chip and dip.
Yeah, what do you think the purpose of that entire, uh, experience for Paul was just to show the inane experience of wedding gifts?
I think so, but also the line that the woman gives him, when he's going to return the gift, where the lady's like, "Oh, well, my husband works at BBDO, and he does this and that," and Pete says, "I'm like, oh, I haven't met him." And she's like, "Well, that's why you're here at lunch." I think that was kind of the overall point, is that he's now distracted. I love the whole thing about with the gun and everything. I
Mhm,
had a note in here of just Pete being browbeaten by his wife for buying something fairly innocuous is just a
mhm.
universal theme.
Okay, so that scene confused me because the way she was acting was as if they did not get 2 chip and dips.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
like,
She
"Was
was acting
Pete
as though
lying? What the fuck?" That
yeah,
was
what does it matter? Like they
yeah,
don't need the $22 that much.
I have a theory that, they were reviewing the episode and they were like, "We can't shoot anything else, but, like, Pete's story needs a stronger resolution." Because you'll notice when they're, uh, shooting him getting browbeaten, like, Trudy is not in the
She's not in
frame.
it.
She's
No,
not in
he's
it, it's
just
her
sitting in bed.
voice, and he's just sitting there kinda like, I think originally they shot it, and it was just kind of like a slow zoom onto Pete, and he's just, like, kinda sad and, like, beaten
Yeah.
because he's annoyed at not being as interesting to women or something.
And on top of that, before that, the end of that story would have been the monologue he gives Peggy about his idea, his like fantasy idea of hunting and
Mhm.
bringing an animal home,
Yeah.
and that that allows them to connect. But yeah, I think you're right. They might have been like sitting around. It's like we need some other button on this
Yeah.
to drive home Pete's story.
Yeah.
But you're right.
Y
Like I never understood Trudy's reaction to that,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's not like it was an heirloom or something. It's literally just it's something you just buy at the store,
yeah, yeah.
and you had multiples.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um, but I do enjoy that. I do enjoy his little his arc and getting the gun and then just being
yeah,
browbeaten and then having to
yeah.
bring it back into work the next day. He's not even allowed to have it in the house. Like I would just
Yeah.
sort of told her I just would have put it in the garage or in a
Mhm.
closet, been like, yeah, I took it back.
And was it an actual rifle or was it a BB gun?
I always took it as a BB gun.
I thought it was a BB gun as well.
Yeah. Hold on, let me I got the Wikipedia pulled up here. Let me see.
And when he's in the office and he's pointing it at everyone in the office, you know, post Columbine, you're just like, "Oh my god.
No, yeah, yeah, I know.
Like, holy
Post
fuck."
just post 1992 when postmen started killing people, just anything like no, that the first time I saw that scene, it was horrifying. You talk about, all the stuff that's different back then as it is now, and you can even get away with, some of the sexual harassment depending on how good looking you are nowadays. One thing ain't nobody getting away with is pulling a piece out and going around the room and scoping everyone.
Dude, that's hilarious that you say that. There really should be like the hot crazy matrix. There
Yeah,
should be like a hot sexual harassment matrix. It's like it's like, all right, you're saying that you're an 8 out of 10 hot and you did a 6 out of 10 sexual harassment, you're in the clear.
yeah, yeah. There's a line there. Well, have you seen that meme where it's two guys? It's like the same thing on top of each other. Where there's this lady sitting in her cubicle and a handsome guy who looks like Patrick Bateman from
American Psycho.
American Psycho. He like steps in the cubicle and he's like, "Looking good there, Debbie," and she's like, "Oh, aren't you sweet?" And then the bottom frame, it's exactly the same shot, but instead of Patrick Bateman, there's just this chubby fat guy with a bunch of zits, and he's like, "Looking good," and she's got the phone picked up. She's like, "Hello, police!"
Yeah, very very accurate.
Yeah. Oh, I had a good question. Who's more
Mhm.
drunk in this episode? Is it Roger or Anthony Jr.?
Ooh. Yeah, they both made
They
some
both
very
barf.
poor decisions.
They both drink. They don't inopportune
Yeah.
times. Both get sick. Both get
Yeah.
caught. I thought that was
Both
interesting.
yeah. Anthony AJ spills the beans to his grandma. I'm trying to think of Roger saying something. I guess he doesn't spill the beans on anything.
No, he just can't. He just can't keep it in his pants around his coworker's wife.
Yeah.
I do love that little monologue he gives about uh going into the wrong house. Like he's so drunk he goes to, like the wrong apartment and the wrong building.
Yeah,
What
dude,
I
I did the apology scene was like that's one of my all-time favorite Mad Men scenes. Just the way that's executed and the way that Don handles it, the way that Roger handles it. I mean, it like Roger did some like horrible things, like nearly unforgivable things, but he like feels genuine remorse.
as much as
And
Roger can feel remorse.
yeah, and Don is his employee. He can fire Don. And he
Yeah.
goes hat in hand, tells him a story, like does everything but like cry and deeply apologize. And I felt like, okay, at least he acknowledged it and took the accountability for it. Like I feel most people would be like, all right, whatever. Like at least my
Yeah.
boss acknowledged it. But
Yeah, and Roger.
Don's like, "No, no," and you think in the scene, because Don's not giving him a fucking inch. Don's, like, making him crawl through broken glass to fucking deliver him this message. And you think by the end of it, like, I think they shake hands or he gives him the bottle of
Gives him
whiskey
the
or
bottle.
whatever, and you're like, "Alright, I think that'll be the end of it." And you're like, "Oh, no."
Yeah.
That's like imagine what Don would have done to Roger had he not done that apology.
Yeah. Yeah, what would have been the next
Like,
step?
she would have murdered him
Yeah.
and gotten away with it like fucking WD-40.
Yeah. Um, Going back to an apology where the guy doesn't give an ounce, to skip ahead in The Sopranos, when Ralphie, kills the stripper, and then,
Mhm.
like, it's, him and Tony have their little
Oh, yeah,
beef,
yeah.
and then, like, 2 episodes later, um, Ralphie has to go into Vesuvio and apologize,
Mhm.
and Tony does not give him an inch in any of that. He's just like,
Yeah,
"What'd you do?" And he
yeah.
doesn't say anything, and he doesn't offer him to sit down, just like with Roger, he does not offer him to sit down, and I also love when Ralphie's like, "Oh, I just wanted to talk to you," and then Tony's just like,
Yeah.
he just puts his, fork down, just, "Well, what I want to come by and apologize." "Well, what'd you do?" "Oh, huh."
Yeah,
But you're right, like, I like Don's no sell of it better because he's just like, "I don't even know what this is about."
yeah.
I love the power play in that. Um, this is a great episode. I really love this one.
Mhm. No, this might be the all-timer for me, just, our personal connection to it. And, my question to you is that how a man should handle an apology from another man?
You're talking about Roger, or are you
Yeah.
talking about from Don's point of view?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yes, but no, with an and here. Uh, that's how you should handle it if you're still not done and you have something planned for later on down the road. Otherwise, if you feel it's sincere and no harm, no foul, then I think you can acquiesce a little bit more.
Mhm,
Uh, but getting back to something we've talked about a couple times about Don and Tony kind of each being people's avatars for not taking any shit ever. Like
mhm.
that's how Tony and Don both respond to those apologies are the avatar of not taking any shit, not accepting the apology, and long-term plans of revenge.
And I will to touch back on the question you posed, like, was Roger aware that Don was the instigator here? Roger never pulls anything like this again in the entire
No,
series. So I
no.
think you might be onto something there. That
Yeah,
Roger, whether he's conscious of it or not, is like, I do something bad to Don, much, much worse things happen to me. I'm
yeah.
not going to do bad things to Don anymore.
The only instance in his life where he got karma, and like you said, either subconsciously or consciously, he realizes that.
Mhm,
And but I just when we're done with this, go back and look at that last scene. And Don, Roger is just pale faced and these he looks sick and he's just looking up at Don and even visually in the scene, the power has shifted and Roger's sunk down. He's disheveled and Don's just upright and lording over him.
mhm.
And there's a look on Roger's face of just absolute fucking hatred. And it's
Yeah,
like, I think you did this, but I'll never be able to pin it on you. I'll never be able to say a word. And
yeah,
congrats on winning this game of chess.
yeah. And there's 2 things in movies and TV show that really grind my gears, and that is the obligatory bad Photoshop picture of the family, 20 years ago. That you're like,
Yep.
"That
Yep.
who the fuck made that with Microsoft Paint and, like, Elmer's glue? That looks like dog shit."
Yeah, there's something there's no excuse for after 1999,
Yeah, and
but it
it's
still
still
continues to be a thing.
to this fucking day, I see it at least once a month. I'm like, "Good God." Like, that is trash. The other thing is clear vomit that is just a mouthful of fake vomit. Like, it 99% of vomit, they're just like, "Oh, I'm gonna be sick," and they cut, and then it's a profile, and then it's just them spitting out some, like,
Yeah,
oatmeal or cottage
yeah,
cheese or something, and it looks like dog shit, and it takes me out of the movie or
yeah,
show. But this, they fucking had a garden hose of vomit hooked up to Roger and just projectile vomited that out, and I was like, "Thank you
yeah,
for
yeah.
making that look like real vomit."
It looks like real vomit. You know, you can make the argument way back in the day, um, how do you get vomit right on camera? How do you make it look real? But then once Jackass came out, now we all know what vomit looks like on camera,
Mhm.
and there's no going back, and you can't
Yeah.
make it look like shit anymore. And this is one of the rare instances where you get, and I don't know whether they did a little bit of CGI because it's not. Here's one I'll one up you on this. It's like I also hate it when it's just a pure profile and they're like this, and then it's just a tube right here. That takes
Yeah.
me out too. But
Mm.
this, it's not a full profile. His head's a little turned. You can see the side of his face. Like it looks great. That
Mhm.
vomit looks great. It looks real.
Yeah.
Um, maybe
It was like
maybe
the appropriate speed as well. Like, when you
yeah,
vomit, when your body's like, "Fucking get out," like, it's got some heft behind it.
yeah,
It's like a fucking
yeah,
super soaker.
yeah. I think the greatest vomit ever caught on camera is in Jackass when they do the eggnog challenge, and they're sitting there drinking the 50 shots of eggnog in 50
Yeah, yeah.
minutes. And there's Preston Lacey as the snowman. There's some lady who's in Mrs. Claus, and then there's a
Mhm.
guy they call Murray, the moderately sober elf. and 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 there's a shot of him where he just turns to the camera and just goes, "Ugh," just spray. And you're right. There's some heft behind it. There's some motion
Yeah.
behind it.
Yeah.
It's not a little, it's not a trickle like that. Boy, it comes
No.
out.
It's not a mouthful, it's a fucking stomachful.
Yeah. Yeah. Then you're right. It's not just enough to fill your cheeks.
Mhm.
It's a gallon of bile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Um,
I won't be happy until both of those are categories in the Oscars.
yeah.
So
I'm
let's get on it, guys.
Look, just like everything else in the Oscars, they'll give best vomit to someone who doesn't deserve best vomit. And then for the next 30 years, all of the great moments in movie history will feature the vomit that should have won,
Mhm.
and they'll
Mhm.
completely ignore the vomit that they gave the Oscar to.
They'll never talk about the King's Speech vomit ever again, as if
No one
it
will
didn't
ever talk about
happen.
Annie Hall's vomit ever again.
But they'll show you Big Lebowski's vomit every fucking year.
Yeah, yeah. They'll never show you Slumdog Millionaire's vomit. Like that'll be just reduced to the ash bin of history. But they'll show you Dark Knight and Wally vomit every fucking year. Um, let's touch on Sopranos a little bit before we wrap this up. Yeah, a
Mhm.
lot of this taking place in the past. Um, I like this episode. It's good. Um, I think uh, it does a great job of they do a great job of casting everybody in the past. Like I
Mhm.
love how Junior looks. I love how his dad looks.
Mhm.
Even Livia doesn't look like a total demon yet. She looks good in a couple scenes until she starts talking. It really drives home how fucking terrible Many Saints of Newark is.
Yeah.
And it just makes me hate it even more.
Mm.
I was rearranging some stuff on my uh thing back here, my bookshelf back here, the other day, and I was looking through stuff, and I was like, why do I have Many Saints of Newark up here in between The Sopranos and Godfather? This does not belong up there, even though it's got the title. So I put it somewhere else.
Yeah.
I didn't
Did
want it on Rushmore.
did you play the PS2 Sopranos game?
I did. I have 2 copies of it.
Yeah.
It is awful. It is
Oh, okay.
truly
I
awful.
assume the gameplay is terrible, but maybe it's like a decent episode.
Not really, but
Yeah.
I know for a fact if you're interested in, what goes on in it, you can pull it up on YouTube. Like, people have
Yeah.
posted all the cutscenes, and the interesting part about it is at least it has the entire actual cast.
Mhm.
Like, it's the same guys doing the voices, um, but, they tried to make it this really small version of Grand Theft Auto, and it's just not that at
Mm.
all.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, go check it out on YouTube. All the stuff, all the cutscenes are shown there. That's not worth playing. I never made it more than like 40 minutes into the game.
And this is coming from, like, arguably the biggest Sopranos fan on earth.
Yeah, yeah, but at least I look, as I've said about a lot of things, I may be a big fan, I may be a mark, but I'm not delusional. Like, if something I like sucks, I'm just gonna admit that it sucks, and I'm not gonna
Yeah.
watch it or play it ever again. I don't
Yeah.
need to twist myself into a pretzel to love the prequels, no matter how bad the sequels have been. No, the
Mm.
prequels still suck. Like, no, I'm done. I'm just done.
Yeah. That's fair. I had a note here that this, at least the episode of Mad Men had some of, like, my favorite quotes in all of Mad Men that I was like my mind was fucking exploded when I was like, "These are all from the same episode?" Like, I thought
Yeah,
these were sprinkled throughout the entire series. It's like, smoking so much is a sign of weakness,
mhm.
um, the you hit 30 and somebody puts out a light,
I had
um
that one written down too. Yeah, that entire when they go out to drink and stare down the chicks at the bar. Yeah, there's a
Mhm.
couple of really good ones in there.
Yeah, they gave you a medal for drinking,
Oh
bouncing
yeah, they gave
off
me a
the
medal, but it wasn't for
walls.
this. It was for drinking.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Roger goes, "You're not gonna make this easy, are you?" Like, Don's,
just
"We
stonewalling them.
we've all parked in the wrong garage."
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, Betty slapping that neighbor bitch.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah, this
what
is
the
it's a great
fuck?
episode.
Oh, he goes Roger goes, "What makes a man marry the same woman twice?" Red
Yeah, did he wake up one day and go, "Oh, that's right, I hate you."
redheads are like a drop of strawberry jam in a glass of milk.
Mhm.
Um,
I like when he's like, when they're going
I
up the
noticed in this
stairs.
episode, Don oh, yeah,
When
go ahead.
I like when they're Roger echoes that later on when they're going up the stairs, when he's drunk and he's a lot less put together because he says that again, but he says it a little bit differently. He's just like, "I love redheads with big breasts."
Yeah, the devolution of Roger.
Yeah,
He's
yeah,
so
yeah.
classy about it.
Yeah, it starts off as this lovely portrait that he's painting verbally, and then it just ends with, "I want a redhead with big, big cans."
Which is exactly what he means. Like, that's what he's saying. Redheads are like a drop of strawberry jam in a glass of milk.
Yeah, 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 exactly.
That's what
Um,
he's saying.
I always like this because when I've dated a redhead in the past, I used to refer to her crotch as strawberry jam.
Yeah.
I wonder why that didn't
Um,
work out.
huh. Maybe you should marry her twice.
Oh, that's right. I hate her.
Um, he's Roger's talking about milk, and Don is like, I just never liked milk. I hate cows. And you're like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder why he hates cows. And then it must be the next episode where the
Yeah.
cow fucking takes his dad's head off.
Well, it's a horse that does it.
Oh, was it a horse?
Yeah, it's a horse, but you can understand
Yeah,
like growing up around that, just not wanting to ever be around it ever again, or just hating any
yeah,
kind of livestock.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. So this episode, man, they knocked it out of the park
Yeah,
with the Mad Men episode, and I mean, Sopranos episode was they're really hitting their stride as well. Like they're
yeah, they kind of get out of, like you said, the first handful of episodes are a little sloppy by today's standards.
mhm,
But Sopranos really hits it. So yeah, next week on Mad Men is the Hobo Code, which I think
mhm,
is one of the best ones. Also,
mhm.
I love all of that. And then after that is Shoot. This is the one where um Peggy goes back to try, or Betty goes back to try and be um a model. So I think the next couple, like Mad Men, starts off stronger than Sopranos, but man, it really is coming into focus right here.
I think so much fun of Mad Men is, like, just how insanely different life is now than it was in the '60s, and just how nonchalantly the pregnant lady smokes in front
Mhm.
of Betty, and
Yeah,
you're just like they're, like, talking about something, and she's just, chimneying away,
just
and you're
having
like,
at it.
"What the fuck? Like, how did
Yeah.
any of us survive?"
Look, I'm not pretending to be like some kind of all-knowing genius who could see through time, but I feel like even if I was alive back then, I wouldn't need like a published report from Time magazine to tell me this probably isn't a good idea.
Yeah, it's like, when I do this, I feel significantly worse. I imagine this would also translate to the baby, maybe?
Yeah, yeah, as though they're not intimately connected in every way,
Yeah.
you know?
Mhm.
Um, that any other thoughts on,
Yeah,
oh, the
yeah.
one
Oh,
that
go ahead,
I have a
go ahead.
complaint about Sopranos,
Mhm,
when they do the flashback and Tony takes his pills, and one of the few times on The Sopranos, they have a song choice that's the most obvious song choice in the entire world, and they play
mhm,
the Jefferson Airplane, "One pill makes you larger and one
mhm.
pill makes you small." That's such a cliche. I can't believe it made it into the show.
Yeah, yeah. It's wild that Sopranos, reached the heights that it did and set a new fucking high watermark and set a new precedent because it started out as such, like, kinda derivative. I mean, especially if, David Chase, got the casting he wanted,
Yeah.
you'd be like, "Dude, I don't know if this would've made lasted 1 season."
Yeah. Yeah, it does
Ray
feel like
Liotta.
a Diet Coke version of, Goodfellas at times.
Mhm. Mhm. Um, yeah, another thought I had was, this episode starts with Don talking to Betty's therapist, and he basically concludes that, you're dealing with the mind of a child. And Don is like, "Well, she wasn't always like this. I didn't mean to marry a child." And then he treats her like a child, like, during the boss dinner scene.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah. So
And
it's,
does that Don
it
just not being aware? Because later on, now and I'm thinking about there's that flashback where he's in California and he's talking to the original Mrs. Draper at Christmas time, and
Mhm.
he asks her if they could get a divorce because he's found someone else he wants to marry. And he's talking about Betty, and he says something like, she's a model and she's this and she's that and she's so happy. She's just so happy. That's not Betty in any way whatsoever. So when
Yeah.
Don says at that, at the time when he's in love and he's in the lavender haze, he sees Betty as this like happy person, and then he says here like, "Oh, I never. This isn't who I married. I didn't. She wasn't always this way." Is it just
Mhm.
Don not seeing it? Is that just Don living in denial?
Yeah. And is part of the reason he's so angry at Roger and needs someone to pay is he's disappointed in himself for making such a poor choice with a partner, and he's
Yeah,
embarrassed, and he's like, "Someone I need to get revenge on someone here."
yeah. I've already got my wife bugged. Who else can I take this out on?
Yeah, yeah, and my final thought there is therapists really should tell us everything they talk about with our wives.
I am paying for this. Oh, that's something that's another thing in this episode where AJ is sent off to uh get treatment for his ADHD,
Mhm, mhm,
and they touch on Betty, and basically if I remember correctly, like Tony has a comment about like, you know, they won't that AJ's therapist not doesn't have to tell them everything.
mhm,
And just being like, well, we're paying for it. Why shouldn't we know what our kid is saying to you?
mhm.
And
Oh, wow. Yeah.
where Don is absolutely doing that.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a good catch.
Yeah, basically we're
Yeah,
dealing with the
yeah.
emotions of a child. That's what he tells her.
I feel like that therapist, that's his conclusion for every female patient he has.
Did I say anything?
Another, interesting insight I have living in LA, the bar that they're at where they're drinking, that's Musso and Frank's, the same bar that, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the opening
Oh
scenes
yeah,
with Al
yeah,
Pacino is filmed there as well.
yeah. Is that the same one where they where Don and Joan go to for Christmas?
I think that's a different one that I have also
Okay.
been to and looks amazing.
Yeah.
It's a Chinese food restaurant now for some reason,
Interesting.
but it's also like they still have the bar and the food's really good. It's like really good Chinese food and just people hang out there and drink. It's awesome.
That's that's what I do in my own house. It's just as much fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. All right. Well, I gotta hit the can here in a few seconds.
Yeah,
So we
yeah.
want to put a bow on this. Do you have anything
We're
else?
we're getting old, man. Our prostates are
Yeah,
enlarging as we
swelling
speak.
up, swelling up.
Yeah. No, I think, my question to you is, was that the first time, Don ate oysters in his life? Like, I mean, I know he first time he either at least pretended to like them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It might have been. Oh, now shit. That just reminds me. Tony goes off on a rant about his mom and dad and what they were like growing up, and he mentions in this episode how much his dad loved oysters and shellfish, and that
Oh.
and his mom did not. And then over on
Mm.
Mad Men, we have an entire thing built around that,
Mhm.
where one character likes it and the other character is just pretending to because he knows this is Roger's weakness. He knows Roger can't say no to the to all the shellfish and vodka.
Well, also, if you were reverse engineering, like, the worst stomach ache to explosive vomiting you ever had, it would likely involve oysters, martinis, and cheesecake.
Yeah, yeah.
Those are the
Which
worst things to have in your stomach when you have a stomach ache.
yeah, yeah. I remember when this was one year we were living together, and the Reds blew like a 3-game playoff lead and got eliminated from the playoffs.
Yeah. With a 100
And
win season.
yeah, they were, gonna go to the World Series, and they blew it in fantastic fashion, and I just came home that night, and I just, like, killed a bottle of vodka and half a cheesecake. I was driving with my redheaded girlfriend at the time when the game ended. I was like, "Pull over into Jewel, I'm gonna go in and get something." I just come out with a handle and just a cheesecake. Just went home and just killed it.
I have 2 very specific grocery needs.
Yeah, yeah. What else did you get? Nothing, nothing at all.
Got nothing. I know we're out of diapers. I don't
Take me
care.
home. Take me home and leave me there.
Leave me to die.
Leave me alone with my pride.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, another great episode, man. We'll be back next week. I promise we'll be back next week with episode 8, with
Mhm.
all the moving and sun dancing now being done. Glad you're having a good time out there and everybody
Yeah.
survived the trip.
Mhm. Yeah. No, it's awesome, man. If you get a chance, bring the kiddos out here.
I think we will. I think we're gonna try and do a couple little trips this year on a plane to see if we can see how they handle it. But
Mhm.
I would definitely love to do that.
Yeah. That'd be fun.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Chris, and thanks so much for tuning in. And until next week, thanks again.
See ya. Good job by
Peace.
you.
All right. Good job by you. I got to take a piss. Goodbye.
All right, see you, brother.